Netanyahu last night called Qatargate a political witch hunt. That was his phraseology. He was claiming that this was all politically motivated. My question for you, Felice, is that correct? Is Netanyahu correct? Or is this an actual serious national security investigation?
I'm not one that jumps to call something a witch hunt. I believe let the facts be seen, understand what really is happening. There's still so much coming out. Yes, the fact that Qatar is involved in funneling money, in getting their hands with soft power around the world is apparent to everybody. The question is, how was it used within the offices of power, and who was involved, and did Prime Minister Netanyahu know? It's not illegal for Israelis to do business with Qataris. Correct. I mean, I think that's a very important point.
It's a very good point.
There's a lot of hypocrisy about Qatar. Israel had diplomatic relations with Qatar until the Second Intifada. Qatar hosts one of the largest U.S. bases in the world and largest air base in the region, and very close to Iran. Qatar funneled money to Hamas at Israel's request because of Netanyahu's own foolish position that having Hamas be in charge in Gaza is somehow good for Israel because it divides the Palestinians and creates a conflict between the PA and Hamas. As Felice said, Qatar is weirdly useful because they straddle both sides of everything. Sure, they support the Muslim Brotherhood for that reason. For that reason, they were at loggerheads with Egypt and Saudi and the UAE for a couple of years, but then they kissed and made up. Qatar apparently was paying someone, maybe two people, in the Prime Minister's office for something. We don't know if it was for intelligence, in which case we have an espionage scandal, or it was for lobbying and PR work from within the Prime Minister's office. This is a case where I tend to believe Netanyahu didn't know because there's so little in it for him. Okay, the bigger issue in Israel, and forgive me for a little bit of a segue, is that when Netanyahu went to the police to testify about this yesterday, he comes out and immediately says in public that this is a witch hunt and that the police is being political. The police, which is run by a far-right winger, okay, Itamar Ben-Gvir. Netanyahu just last week, in trying to machinate the firing of the Shin Bet chief for political reasons, it started to hint through various channels, including in public in his talk about the deep state, that the Shin Bet knew about October 7th.
Well, so this is actually a question.
I have to underscore, this is clear. He said the Shin Bet knew for hours about October 7th and didn't tell him. Now, this is being perceived in Bibi's base as a plot by the Shin Bet, allied with the leftist opposition, to let Hamas massacre Israelis. This has come from Netanyahu, that the police, the Shin Bet, the Attorney General, the judiciary, all of them are in a plot against him. This is insanity. You know, this is such a departure from good governments. You want your government to do good, or at least not do bad. This government is willing to burn down a house to achieve political points and to stay in power.
Respond.
I think what everyone is troubled about is that Prime Minister Netanyahu has not come forward, and even from the beginning, in taking responsibility. I think that is the issue. And forget everything else, I think it might have cleared a lot of air in the way everybody harbors so much hate. I think when you're going through the war you're going through,
sure.
I think when you're going through the fact that you have so many hostages still left, and by the way, Qatar does not need to stop this. They need to continue, because once the hostage deal is over, they're not needed. Well, let's not forget that either.
Well, I don't think Qatar is trying to prolong negotiations.
But Qatar enjoys that position. That's what they thrive for.
Can I just say, accepting responsibility is insufficient in Israel because they've developed this new paradigm where officials accept responsibility and that's it. And then they go on.
But eventually there'll have to be an investigation. We're going to have to understand who is responsible. Netanyahu has done worse than not accept responsibility. He has done everything conceivably possible to deflect responsibility. They are now experimenting with a new narrative where, yeah, the government's to blame, but everyone's to blame, including previous governments. Well, guys, when everyone's to blame, then no one is to blame. Okay? Netanyahu has prevented the establishment of an inquiry commission that has been de rigueur and even minor disasters by arguing that any inquiry commission, which would be run by a Supreme Court justice, as all of them have throughout the history of Israel, would necessarily be political and against him. So now he's delegitimizing the idea of inquiry commissions, which in Israel were categorically necessary to examine the lessons that are to be learned from a disaster. This is not a disaster. This is a cataclysm. Netanyahu is avoiding the inquiry into it plainly because he knows he will look bad and is hoping that memories will fade or bigger disasters perhaps will happen to take attention away from it. It's
Do you agree? I want to give Felice a chance to answer.
As bad as Israel's system is, it's still a system. There's still a court. There are still questions asked, and I feel everybody's jumping to conclusions. I say let's wait and see how this turns out. Let's see how the gag order is possibly lifted.
Oh, you mean at Qatargate?
And Qatargate, yes.
Yeah.
And I think you have to look at each case and be a little bit cautious and wait and not jump to the conclusion, which everyone is trying to do. Everyone's trying to get a got you. This isn't about a got you. This is about really understanding what happened on October 7th, really understanding what happened in terms of Qatar. What is Qatar's role truly? What does that mean for Israel, for the United States, for the world? Because they're a huge player. They're not going away.
No one can argue
I'm
that.
going to have to stop you.
But I'm just saying they're trying to avoid shedding any light on any of that. That's clear. And for that, I think they deserve condemnation.